Recently, a family member asked if I knew any way to access psilocybin so that they could try microdosing as an alternative to antidepressants therapeutically. And it reminded me of how over the years in different forums, this topic of the relationship between mind-altering substance like psychedelics and Zen practice, what's the relationship between the two of them? Are they compatible or not? And of course people have a whole range of opinions about that. But in one of those forums some years ago, a teacher gave a talk and made the comment that's really stayed with me ever since, that everything that we experience, or you could say that we ingest, is a mind-altering substance. So that's what I'd like to explore today. That everything that we experience is actually a form of mood-altering and mind-altering. And we're making choices actually all the time to alter our mental state with various motivations for why we do that, what we're after. And mind, in the Buddhist tradition, is sort of central. Mind is the thing. And I'd like to start with the koan that emphasizes the centrality of mind. This is from the Hidden Lamp, a collection of koan stories, some very old and some contemporary. So this is a contemporary story from the 20th century of a bhikkhuni in Thailand, a woman practitioner in Thailand. Bhikkhuni Kapil Singh keeps the precepts. That's the title of the koan. Venerable Bhikkhuni Borami Kapil Singh was the first Thai woman to receive full ordination as a bhikkhuni. As is required in bhikkhuni ordinations, she took 311 precepts. A young man who was visiting her asked, "How can you keep all 311 precepts?" She answered, "I keep only one precept." The young man, surprised, asked, "What is that?" She replied, "I just watch my mind." And there's a commentary here by her daughter, who also is a bhikkhuni, and she is writing about this koan, this exchange that her mother had with a young monk. So I'll read it. It's not very long, but it's not very short either. Thailand has, her name is Dharmananda. Thailand has been a unified country since the 13th century. Throughout its 700-year history, the community of monastics has only included male monks. This has been true despite the fact that the Buddha established the fourfold Sangha: monks, male monks, female monks, laymen and laywomen, all of whom share the responsibility of upholding and practicing the Buddha's teachings. But the full ordination of women never arrived in Thailand. According to the monastic rules, a woman who seeks ordination must be ordained by both bhikkhunis and bhikkhus. And because the requisite number of bhikkhunis from India never came to Thailand, Thailand did not have its own bhikkhuni sangha. My mother, Venerable Bhikkhuni Borami Kapil Singh, was the first Thai woman to receive full ordination and to take the 311 precepts of a bhikkhuni. She went to Taiwan in 1971 and received ordinations there. In Thailand, people believed that taking 8 or 10 precepts is better than taking 5 precepts. And of course, observing 227 precepts, as a monk does, is even better. But people had never seen a bhikkhuni who observed 311 precepts, so this initially caused much dismay and confusion. In this story, Venerable Kabul Singh simply said that she takes only one precept, to watch her mind. The many precepts are ways of controlling the actions of body and speech, but physical and verbal actions are expressions of the mind. Once the mind is well controlled, all other expressions are purified. All the exercises of meditation are various ways to understand the nature of mind and to see things as they really are. This has always been the way of Buddhist practice. The well-known masters in the past practiced watching and training the mind. Simply watching the mind allows one to see the nature of mind and leads to awakening, to nirvana. And a little further on in this commentary, there's a story about a lizard. There's a certain kind of lizard that makes 3 sounds. It makes the sound of greed, it makes the sound of anger, and it makes the sound of delusion. And it lives in a place that has 6 entrances. If a person closes 5 entrances and watches the 6th, they will be able to capture that lizard. And of course, these are the 5 doors of the senses: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, touch. And if we simply watch the 6th door, the door of the mind, we will catch the lizard of greed, anger, and delusion. Watching the mind, therefore, has always been the most important practice. As Venerable Bhikkhuni Kabul Singh explained, all other precepts flow from this one. But my mother also lived by the precepts. After she was ordained as a bhikkhuni, she had her own tiny room, and apart from her low bed, there was hardly any space. Upon my return to Thailand from Canada, when I was 28, I slept next to her bed for the first 2 nights, happy to be close to her again. But on the 3rd night, when I started to spread the bedding on the floor, she asked me to go back to my room. I was hurt. She explained that in the Vinaya, the monastic code, a bhikkhuni cannot spend more than 3 nights with a laywoman. That is the rule, and that is what my mother was following. When she was 94, she called me to announce that she wanted to leave her body. At that time, I was only a samaneri, a novice bhikkhuni, so I told her jokingly that she should not leave until I was a fully ordained nun. She chose to pass away the next year in 2003, just after my full ordination as a bhikkhuni. So this is an interesting story, hearing about how this venerable nun, bhikkhuni, she honoured the precepts even to the point of not having her daughter, who you can kind of gather lived in Canada and rarely saw her mother. Even when her daughter came to stay with her in Thailand, she only let her stay in her room for 2 nights because of the rules that she was following, the Vinaya she was following. So she followed the precepts. But she says in this exchange that the only precept she really follows is observing the mind, noticing the mind. And all other things follow. And I have found this to be my experience as well, as I'm sure many of you have, that when we really just give a lot of attention to our mind, and our mind becomes more settled and more present and less caught up in being enamored by our thoughts, we start finding that our actions and our speech becomes more wholesome. We don't even have to try that hard, it just starts happening. So, thinking about this idea that mind is central and that maybe everything is a mind-altering substance, not just things like psychedelics or illicit drugs or prescription drugs, alcohol, the obvious ones. You can see there's a lot that we kind of know if we think about it just for a few minutes are mind-altering, but we don't think of them as mind-altering substances like nicotine, coffee, but just food. Food is so enjoyable. For most people. For some people it's a stress, but for most people it's actually really enjoyable. We look forward to it. It's kind of breakfast time, It's mind-altering. And I remember reading just not long ago, I can't remember, I think maybe it's called Ozempic, the injection that people can take to lose weight, makes you lose your appetite. People have said, it's fantastic, I lose weight, but often after a while people say it makes my life kind of feel dull because they lose an interest in food. So a lot of people end up going off that drug because they miss the mood-altering effects of food on their life. So food is a mind-altering substance. People are mood-altering substances. Who we spend our time with. All of us know that experience when we're in the company of certain people. We feel more at ease, and maybe we feel more confident and feel more connected. And then with other people, maybe for historical reasons, and maybe we don't even know why, we might feel a little insecure, or we might find ourselves feeling impatient, or even irritated. All sorts of other emotions come up depending on whose company we keep. And different places that we go impact our mood and our mind state. This temple here, this Shakyamuni Center, is a beautiful example of a place where great attention is given to every single detail of the whole property, which is very large. Every week I notice a little change has happened, a little improvement, to help cultivate a feeling. For me, I imagine the motivation is to create a feeling of love for the present moment, because so much attention is given to each thing. The altar has changed. Every week when we come here, there's different fruit on the altar, different offerings, different flowers. And out the front, there's lots of different potted plants, and they get slightly rearranged and pruned and just changed a little bit to make them look a little better week by week. As old leaves start to fall, you can see somebody goes in and snips them off and brightens things up. So it creates a space when you walk in here, feeling a kind of reverence for life, and that's its intention. But we can walk into different spaces and have very different feelings. Maybe walking into a very large high-rise building with extremely large doors and lots of imitation granite walls and big glass panels might give us a feeling of feeling kind of maybe a little bit small and intimidated or something like that. Or maybe if we've got a suit and have a briefcase, it makes us feel important. Clip, 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 clip of your feet across the floors, importantly heading to the elevator. Yeah. Different cities or suburbs that we live in, different houses that we live in impact our mood. And some of us have some choice in these things, and some of us don't have much choice in these things. So I think it's interesting to think of everything that we experience through our 5 senses, like the lizard in the house with 6 doors. Everything that we experience through our 5 senses, eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body, influence our mood, influence our mind state. They're mind-altering. and we can make some choices about what comes in, what we allow in, where we choose to put ourselves, who we choose to be with. But maybe the most powerful of the senses is the sixth sense, the mind that thinks, the thinking mind. And a lot of Zen practice is about getting to know the thinking mind. And it's not so much that we're trying to actively change our thinking mind as reveal our original mind. And I think this is a very important distinction. We're not trying to go in there with our meditation practice and change our mind. Our mind will change, but what we're actually wanting to do is reveal the original natural mind. Because the original natural mind, in our school of Buddhism, the way we understand it, is that the original mind is at ease and is intimate with everything, is not separate from anything. That is the original mind. And so we have various practices, mind-altering substances that we ingest to help reveal this natural mind, this original mind. Because all day and even all night, our mind is thinking thoughts. And a lot of the time, we're just actually engaged with them. They're happening and we're thinking about them, and we're either feeding particular ones or not. As thoughts come up in our mind, we can latch onto them and get very involved and identify with them and add more and more, or we can let them drift past. And so we can choose to sometimes really get involved with them and add more, and these are the wholesome thoughts that we're having. We might be contemplating. For example, I was sitting in the waiting area of a court, of the magistrate's court in Canberra the other day, and I had to wait for 6 hours for this court case to come up. And I couldn't really do anything else because I was sitting there and I kept on looking up at the door to see whether it was time to go in or not. And it was important. It was going to be a fairly short case. I didn't want to miss it, and I wasn't sure if anyone would call me in time. So I kept looking up. And so I got extremely tired for a whole day just sitting there. I couldn't really read. I tried to read, but I'd be looking, I'd go like half a paragraph and I'd look up again. I'd look down and try and read, I'd look up again. Someone would come out. Oh, it's not the lawyer. Okay. Look down again. By the end of the day, I was so tired. And it gave me a kind of, I started to reflect on what it would be like, for example, to be a refugee, where you're just perpetually in a waiting state to know what your future is going to hold. What's going to happen? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? You can't really relax because you don't know. You don't know. You don't have power. And so that was actually that was a thought worth my mind staying with and feeding. So I kept on thinking about that, various different ways, spent time with it, and that seemed to be something I could do while I was waiting. So that was good. I did do that while I was waiting. So some thoughts it's good to feed, but there's a lot of thoughts. It's much better just to say, oh, just go by. Off you go. Off you go. Don't need to give energy to that thought. So what we do in our lineage, in the Soto lineage of Zen, ways in which we create mind-altering environments for ourselves, the primary one we do is Zazen. And in our Sangha, Twining Vines, we meet online in the mornings at 6 a.m. and in the evenings at 7:30 p.m. And we come here on Saturdays and sit together. So we sit Zazen and observe the mind. Settle the mind. As thoughts come up, our practice is to just let them drift by, like clouds in the sky, and to bring our attention just back to the breath. Very simple. Just come back to the breath. Let the thoughts go past like clouds, whether they're just little white clouds or big sort of storm clouds, doesn't matter. Just let them go by and come back to the breath. So that's a kind of mind-altering practice that we do. And it definitely works. It definitely works. The more people practice over the years, the more they notice that their natural mind starts to become their condition. They start to be more at ease, start to be more caring, feel more intimate with everything. It just happens. That's what practice does. So that's one thing that we do, like we just did today. We do bowing. Bowing is a beautiful practice. It's kind of honouring ourselves and honouring everything else. It's a relinquishing of self-identification. This action that we do, the image is that we're bowing down and lifting the feet of the Buddha above our heads. It's a relinquishing of self-identification, self-concern. We still look after ourselves, but we're relinquishing our general over-attachment to ourselves. We're relinquishing that when we bow. But we're honouring ourselves when we bow. And we offer incense and we light candles. And these are again just sort of a recognition of the beauty and worthiness of life and of this present moment. We study. We study together. We contemplate. Sometimes we have rituals that we do, like we have a well-being ceremony once a month. That's one of our ritual forms, one of our ceremonies. And it alters people's minds. These ceremonies alter people's minds in beneficial ways. Alter or reveal the essential mind. We say alter, but maybe reveal is actually a better word for it. So this is what we do, this is our practice. And it can give us the aspiration to want to wake up to be a fully enlightened person in this lifetime. And we can do that. All we have to do is sit and let ourselves see our true mind. It's very easy and it's also very difficult. So would anyone like to comment or ask a question? I'll just make it so I can see people online again. Yes, Yevgeny?
Some years ago, I really wanted to have this psychedelic experience. Yes, probably people want it because they want to have some extraordinary experiences, like a non-mundane. Like, yes, everything alters our mind, but yeah, we might want something like really, really special, which would open up us like in a dramatic way, like on a spot. So we changed to this. So I really wanted it, and somehow when I started practicing, it just went away. I didn't want it anymore. I'm not seeking it. I didn't know why, but it's kind of the appeal is lost. I didn't think about it much, but yeah, I'm not interested in it.
So Yevgeny is just saying, in case you couldn't hear online, that he used to be interested in the idea of trying psychedelics and having a sort of a dramatic, positive experience. But since practicing, that desire has kind of faded away. And I feel the same. I've had quite a few opportunities where people have asked me, would I like to? It's like, oh, actually, I'm quite happy doing Zazen. Particularly in Sesshin, when we do retreats, the experience of sitting for 5, 6, 7, 8 days It's incredibly mind expanding. It really is not different to the experience that people have with psychedelics, but in one way that I think it probably turns out to be generally a much more powerful experience is because we've worked really hard for it. We've sat for days and days and days, and so then when these very expansive experiences come, we feel more like a sort of a satisfaction that came through our own effort. And then I think the lasting effect is far greater, generally speaking. There's always exceptions to this, but for myself, I feel a kind of deep satisfaction in my own effort when those experiences come, and then they stay in my everyday, ordinary life. They don't just evaporate, as they so often do for people who do psychedelics. But not all people. Some people, for psychedelics, it's truly life-changing, so it can be. But I'm happy enough doing it this way. Yeah. Bill?
Yeah, just we can resonate with those comments. With in my limited personal experience, the difference is that there's a duality in psychedelics, me and thing. Whereas if you have that sort of experience through Zazen, it's undeniably all come from the one spot.
Yeah. I'll just read. So Bill was just saying he has similar thoughts to what I just shared, and one observation he's had is with psychedelics there's a sort of a duality. There's the person and the psychedelics. There's the two things. Whereas in Zazen, when you have that experience, it's all come from the one place, from your own mind. It's all come from just where you are. Yeah. Francis?
Just going back to what you were saying about thought, like letting thoughts just kind of go by. When there's something that's quite reoccurring and it's linked to sort of like previous things that have happened in your life that are still sort of unresolved, my understanding is that we should sit with that.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
rather than letting it go, I mean, I guess I've got my way of kind of sitting with it.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering what your advice or and so on would be.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. As so often is with our Zen practice, we say one thing, but then we also say, and sometimes the absolute opposite. So sometimes thoughts, we just let them drift past. Pleasant thoughts, neutral thoughts, unpleasant thoughts. But Francis is just commenting that sometimes you have a recurring thought, probably a slightly negative recurring thought, a recurring thought, and what do we do with the thought that keeps coming back? Kinds of examples are either a particular event, just repeating that event over and over, or a thought like, I'm not good enough, type of a thought, some variation of that. And so sometimes what our practice is to be really aware of that thought and really curious about it and really spend time with it. Just keep with that thought. And again, sesshin is a great place for that. Sometimes we can stay with a thought and we get to see there's this thought, and then when we stay with it, we get to see that underlying it there's actually some other thought. Maybe sometimes even one even below that. We get time to become very curious about our thought patterns. This idea in our practice that just putting the eye of awareness on something sometimes allows it to transform, allows it to dissolve, or allows it to be understood. And when it's an unhelpful thought, sometimes putting that eye of awareness on it, that gaze on it, it sort of loses its power and just drifts away. Yeah. So that's what we do sometimes. Sometimes we pay attention to the breath, but other times we actually pay attention to a particular thought pattern for a period of time. But I would say even in every period of Zazen, it would be good at some point to just come back to the breath a little bit. Even just for a couple of breaths. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We'll just finish with a chant and some bowing.